All right, GM, everybody. We're back with another episode of State of the Art. This time we're joined by one of my favorite artists in the space, Summer Wagner. Summer, how are you doing today?
GM, I'm doing good here in Rockford, Illinois, enjoying some beautiful spring heat.
Yeah, so speaking of Rockford, one of the first questions I ask everybody is where did you grow up and how did that impact your art or your artistic style?
I was born in Illinois, in Elmhurst, Illinois, which is like an hour away from Rockford, but long story short, ended up in Rockford and lived here till I was 12. So had like a childhood here, always playing outside was like a big thing. Playing pretend games with the neighbors, all of that kind of play, I think really impacted me being very playful as an adult. But then at 12, I moved to Southern California with my family and lived there through college. And that also really refined my ability to kind of tell stories. I didn't have access to playing outside anymore. It was like a very paved over environment. People do have yards, but not everybody has a yard in California because it's very expensive. And so we lived in a very small house. And so I kind of started to put a lot of my time and energy into like theater and drawing and dance, and kind of the combination of having a wildly free childhood in Illinois and like a very motivated adolescence in California. Put those two together, pop a girl into Illinois during COVID, and all of a sudden you have fine art photographer Summer Wagner.
The perfect mix to get you into fine art photography. So before you popped into COVID and you're back in Illinois becoming one of the, my favorite fine art photographers in the space here, how did you get into photography?
So I went to college for film production. And so which is, by the way, not a smart choice. Okay. There was
Pro tip for everyone listening, do not go for film production right now.
Don't go to film school. I really enjoyed studying film, but I was in a program it very much so encouraged you to kind of like pick a single track. So I was doing like directing and production. So like ADing, assistant directing. And so I never really had my hands on the camera, and I would like write and direct things and really, really enjoyed it. But it was also a very conservative university. Long story as to how I ended up there. But so I kind of had there was a lot of censorship that happened with the material that I was making. And when I got to Illinois because of COVID, I didn't have a camera. I was like completely broke. And I was just like kind of miserable because it was COVID and I was very isolated. I had spent a lot of time working to try and have an at least somewhat creative career. Although when I was graduating before COVID happened, it was looking more like I was going to end up doing like ADing or like commercial stuff or like assisting people. But yeah, I got to Illinois. I was working at a grocery store for a year. And towards the end of that year, I was kind of just like really not enjoying it and wanted to figure out a different way to make money. I live in a very, very affordable area. I live in one of the most affordable areas in the US, which is awesome because that means you can do odd jobs and kind of make it work a little bit if you live frugally.
It's the
So I was
Rust
like,
Belt.
what was
Yes,
that?
the Rust Belt for sure. That's the
Oh,
Rust
yeah.
Belt vibe.
We love the Rust Belt.
So you're doing odd jobs, making enough for your first camera, realizing like,
Yeah.
I can get out of the grocery store.
I need to get out of here. And so my friend lent me a camera, and that was really the beginning of it all. I have amazing friendships here, and I've been friends with my community here since I came to Illinois, and like just the most playful, beautiful, imaginative like collection of people. And I think that really made a big difference too. because, I would have some silly willy-nilly idea and they would be down to like, make it happen. Particularly, I also have a little sister. The first pictures I ever took with this camera that my friend let me borrow was on the roof of my childhood home with my little sister who's 10 years younger than me. And actually those pictures really, really do like completely exemplify even the style that I have today. So it's kind of fun to look back on them and be like, and to see how far I've come, but also it was always there. But yeah, she lent me a camera. I was like, I'm going to do family portraits and like engagement photos and stuff like that. And I did those photos for $75 a session, which is like, just to build
That's
up.
a steal. Like by the time you factor gas and time and before you even edit them, like,
Oh my God. No,
yes.
I would be doing like 20 hours of work for $75 and like would deliver an ungodly amount of photos because I didn't know what I was doing. So I would give people like 300 photos that I took of them, all edited, all like just.
Were they shocked when you gave them that many? Were they like,
I make the joke these days because it's totally 100% true. I would deliver the like particularly family photos or like stuff like that. I would deliver these photos and the families would always be like, "Oh my God, thank you." But like they were definitely wondering why everybody looked orange and why they looked like the skin tones were off and why it was edited so weird because, I just could not get into like the norm core portrait photography style, partially because I just wasn't into it and partially because maybe I just like truly wasn't that talented at it. I was just like interested in composing more interesting things that I found more interesting, but the problem is that people don't want, their child to look like a sad Victorian pauper. They want to, capture his two missing front teeth in a smiley moment. And I just like wasn't that good at that. So it was kind of funny. There were some funny moments. And I ended up getting more hired by like younger people to take portraits of them that were more kind of creatively driven, like portraits of people where they just want to not necessarily like have like the classic look, but have something a little bit more fantastical and creative. And then I would just shoot on the side all the time, things that I found interesting. And then eventually it snowballed.
I'm going through your early Instagram posts, and
Oh
it is
no.
such a good thing to do. Like, I'm gonna make sure we get some of these in the clips here. But like going through and looking at your early posts, like the editing, the Victorian style, orangey with it's there. Like, how did you start this style? Like, how did the style come about? Because it was clearly evident from like I'm looking at a picture. It is with your sister, but she's holding like a mirror with like a sun.
That was the first one. That was the first one.
Yeah, and it feels like a Summer Wagner, even though at the time there was like one other post that was Summer Wagner. So how did you get inspired to pursue this artistic style that you've created?
I think that probably just spending time playing around in Lightroom, to be honest, is like one of the biggest things. I had never afforded myself that type of time in Lightroom. Like I didn't buy the program and really dive in before. And I just allowed myself to go the most craziest, boldest directions and like not judge myself for it. I had been very much so inspired by like some psychedelic healing that I had been doing. I had been tripping pretty regularly, and it just, when you have that experience of like everything is happening all at once and like everything is alive and moving and you could see even the most like intense textures that maybe in like a sober moment you would be like, oh, that's, somebody's acne or like freckles or like sunspots or something. when you're tripping, you see those things and you're like, that is so beautiful. And like, there's just so much richness and beauty and texture in people's, like, everything from the fabric that they're wearing to the trees behind them. And so I started to edit to like kind of get that feeling across. And the skin tones was one of the first things that I really fell in love with, like recreating that psychedelic experience, because I wanted to draw out those details. A lot of photography editing, you're getting rid of those details. You're making somebody's skin look perfectly even or perfectly textureless. And for me, I was like, no, I want the beauty in the texture. I want to see every detail and like have the contrast between the colors and the textures really add like a level of interest in the photograph. And once I started to kind of play around with that in the skin tones, it kind of led to me discovering that in like the entire photograph as a whole.
No,
Yeah.
that's crazy. Like you're just, I mean, it's not crazy at all, but it is also kind of crazy. I love that. I think when I think of your work, I think of like the almost ghost-like qualities that you're able to pull from not only the people but the places that you're taking the pictures from. It just like completely enamors me and gets me like lost as a viewer. Where does the spooky slash like a ghost like slash ephemeral vibe of your work, like where does that come from?
Man, such a good question, because like I've never been somebody who is like very drawn to explicitly scary or spooky things. Not because I don't like it, but just because I have never really desired to like create explicitly spooky work. But I think like exactly like you said, the environment that I live in Rockford really, really lends itself to that feeling of emptiness and the kind of ghostliness that is seen in my pictures. You know, the Rust Belt region of the Midwest is, you know, basically an area of the US where industry was popping. It was booming. There was a lot of wealth, a lot of jobs, a lot of excitement in like the 60s, 70s, 80s. And then eventually what happened was, and Detroit is a really good example, but all of that industry ended up completely uprooting and leaving. And what they left behind was the ghosts of those communities, leaving behind also people, of course, and people who don't have a way to live because there's not that industry that was once the cornerstone of these communities. So like Rockford, where I live, has a ton of abandoned buildings, just a ton of history, also a very difficult history for a lot of the people that live here. And a lot of my ghostly images, most of them exist in the Parody of a Tangled Thread, that collection. And that collection was shot in like a giant church, and also among other locations that kind of are contemplating the same thing. So I always love having the space be a character in the shot, which is why I shoot a lot of my pictures very wide, because I think that that kind of context always adds the necessary drama in a piece. It's kind of like you have the subject or the person, and then you have like the environment that they're in, and there's like a conversation being had there. And in some pieces, the environment is a ghost, and then also the subject themselves is a kind of ghost.
Yeah, and then the way that you'll use the ghost like figures to almost represent like things that may have happened in the past, or you know, some difficult thing that you've had to go through. Like I feel like for me as a collector, I don't get to see a lot of the themes or threads that you weave throughout your work. Like anytime I could throw in a thread reference, I'm going to here. But Have you always been this open and vulnerable in your creative process with like drawing on your internal experiences to create these moving pieces? Or is that something that you've kind of adapted to over time as a creator?
I gotta say, I have always been pretty vulnerable with my art, and like in a way that I actually look back and I cringe. Cause, and not to say that we should be cringing about making art about our personal experiences. However, there have been times, particularly in film school, when I was like making work that I just like, I thought I was saying one thing, and I look back and it turns out I was like just outing myself. I think artists really, really do that. Artists are like always just, even when they don't think they are, just outing themselves for like their past or their experiences or their feelings on something. And I I've always been pretty, even if it's unintentional, like pretty vulnerable in my expression of art. Maybe it's because it's the only way that I know how to do it, like, and the only way I find it kind of like fulfilling or interesting, or maybe I just need to do it. Like it's just something that needs to come out. With the parody of a tangled thread, there's a lot of kind of like loftier thoughts that are going on in that collection that I am really excited about on the surface, and like of course enjoy talking about. And then there's the kind of like deeper stuff that was, we've talked about it.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Just kind
sure.
of me like shooting in the church. I have religious trauma. I don't talk about this a lot in any of the captions too much, but now I'm kind of like, the more I've processed the collection and shooting there, and the literal images themselves, like you can just see my heart is right out there in the pictures, and it's like kind of explicit. And what are you gonna do? Like that's just how art comes out, and it needed to be a part of that story, and it is part of the story, and I'm proud of it.
That's one of my favorite things about your work is just how vulnerable you are with, like we've talked about. We don't have to get into it again, but just some of the deeper meanings and the things you've pulled out of yourself to then share with us. I think is just so interesting and something I don't see much of at all. Definitely something I want to highlight more. It kind of leads into my next question, which is a little more simple though. It's just like, what motivates you to create? Is it to get out those emotions, or is there more?
Yeah, to get out the emotions, to process things I've experienced, to try to find community in these experiences. Like when I first got onto Twitter, it was just such an opening up of like a creative waterway, like because there was a community, a very cool community of people to express things with, and have this kind of like mutual ongoing conversation through art making. And it really, really fed me, pulled me out of a pretty serious depression. And I think that that's really ultimately what the beauty of art is, to like articulate things that are ineffable, and find relief and solace and inspiration from you being understood by other people, and other people being understood by you, and you feeling understood by looking at somebody else's art or expression.
Like how did that process go from like joining Twitter to finding yourself completely wrapped up in the community and finding a new home? Because I think for many people, they get on Twitter and it's almost kind of isolating. Like they see all these people talking and they're using words they don't understand, and they don't want to, jump into the conversation, look like an idiot or be judged or something. Like how did you find entering the Twitter community, like, and maybe if you have any tips for other people entering it, are there any tips that you would give them?
So I joined Twitter in 2020, early 2021, or no, maybe October 2021. And I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me on that. But I was very quickly just sharing my work, and like the photography community on Twitter was so badass, bro. Like just I just could comment on people's stuff and people would respond. Some of my favorite artists from Instagram were on there, and I was like, I forced myself to make comments, even if like I needed to make friends. I was incredibly isolated living in this small city and did not have a lot of photography friends. I didn't know what I was doing. I wanted to learn. So when I saw like some of my favorite artists being active on Twitter, I started to just kind of like just leave little comments. And it meant like if I had any thought about this piece or this work, whether it be, oh, I like that color, or that composition is really cool, or this is interesting, normally my shy ass would be like, I don't need to say it. They don't need to hear it. But I forced myself to comment and to just put my thoughts out there into the ether. And that really, really, really helped me, because I was able to start conversations that I didn't even know I needed or wanted or could have, just by like being a little bit more active than I was comfortable with, or a little bit more active than I was used to. And what turned out is that, you get added to a group chat, and then all of a sudden you're talking to people every day, and you're talking about the artwork, and just like a really, really kind, beautiful group of people who are maybe in a similar situation as you in terms of like being online and or being in a smaller area, or needing some sort of companionship or friendship circle that's creatively driven. And yeah, it totally changed. It was the soil that made my whole journey as like a fine art photographer really pop off, because that creative community is like totally necessary in being able to kind of refine your craft and know where people are at and what people are resonating with and stuff.
No, I think that's important for people to hear too, who might have the reservations about jumping in. It's like you kind of just have to force yourself to engage, and you'll eventually make friends, and it'll be way better than you thought it could ever be possible. It's just like
Yeah,
forcing yourself to take that step is really important.
exactly. And forcing yourself to like value your own voice and like value your presence in a space. I think that that's like really, really the hardest part to get over when entering a new space. Also being okay with like not knowing everything, and like
Yeah.
being fine with being like, I have no idea what's going on. Like, can you please like, or like, how do I do this? Or like, people love explaining things to other people. So allow them to shower you with knowledge, and like, you don't have to prove to anybody that you know anything ever. It's always cool to come into a situation just being ready to be open with your newness to things.
No, I think people like, yeah, people like helping new people in the space. Like if you come in and you're like, hey, I'm new, I need some help. Like, people might even overwhelm you with information sometimes,
Oh, for
depending on where
sure.
you ask. Like,
This space is truly so nice when it comes to like people helping, like crazy, in fact, how kind people are.
yeah,
And
anytime we see somebody new who has like a genuine interest in the technology and what it affords both artists and collectors and people in the ecosystem, it's like, yeah, let me explain this to you. I'll spend all day talking about it. Um,
exactly.
but yeah, not to spend all day talking about it here. Another question I do have for you, because you're somebody who draws on these deeper emotions and thoughts, is like, what does your creative process look like? Are you taking a bunch of sketches of compositions before they come to life? Are you keeping track of all of these different emotions and ideas that you go through in like notebooks and journals? Like, what does your creative process look like?
Creative process is a little chaotic, to be honest, at first. And then as like the idea develops, it gets way more defined. I think that a really, 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 really important part of any creative process of anybody's, whether you're a painter or a writer or a photographer or whatever, is allowing yourself the time and the space to experience life deeply. And that is like a big part of my creative process is experiencing life, being present, noticing things around me, feeling the moments around me, the people around me deeply, and of course having a relationship with my own self in a present way. All of that is not very easy. And you can see in my work that me struggling with that is a huge part of what I've had to say over this last couple of years, because I do a lot of work on my phone or with my phone, with phones in the pictures. But I think that that's awesome because that's what we're experiencing. You know what I mean? So living life, experiencing it deeply, even if it's from your phone or computer or whatever. And then also I love like spirituality in the sense that I'm not very like, I'm not a very spiritual person in terms of belief, but I do enjoy ritual deeply and think that there's a lot that can be taken from paganism. And that's been a very important part of my work in this last couple of years. And I think that there's just so much symbolism that's been developed over centuries of history and practice, and it's really beautiful for me to kind of like bring that practice into my life and spend time in nature and kind of like take those moments and bring them into my work as like kind of bigger picture contemplations. That's what ritual is all about, you know. It's like building a space or a moment that has a physical, it's like a physical analogy for like some emotional movement. And I do think of photographing as being a ritual, especially in the long exposure. And then this was not planned, but I have some journals here that I use all the time. Let me see if I can find one. I have like a drawing. This is my drawing journal. This is my observations journal. And this is my like scheduling note-taking journal. Normally I only have like one journal, but I decided to try 3 little journals this time.
I feel like that's smart.
It's been really fun. Like, it's been fun. And like you can see here, I have like sketches as to pictures that I'm going to take with like notes, emotional notes about what it is and what it means. Let me see if I can find another sketch of a picture that I have taken.
I love that. I love the amount of thought and preparedness that goes into your work.
Here's some more. You know, I'm actually not very talented at drawing at all. So I've been trying to get better at it, but it's kind of hard.
Drawing is so hard. I mean, when I map something out, it's very bad lines and stick figures. And
oh my gosh.
Can't tell. I also do what you do though with the multi-journal. So I have one that's like my daily planner / like scheduling / I'm doing productive stuff. Then I have another journal that is I just watch videos on YouTube about art and then take notes.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I have another one that's like starting to be a workout journal because I need to take care of my body. But I think it does help separating it out. And then you know when you have that journal, it's like, oh, this is my sketch journal. I'm in like sketch mode.
Exactly. And then I can go in and be like, okay, those are my lists. Okay, those are, you know, these are physical ideas that I have. Or like I do a lot of just mindless sketching because it's like helps chill me out if I'm having some anxiety or something.
Do you ever get pieces that come from the mindless sketching? Like you're just doing something
Seriously?
And then the next thing you know, you're like, holy shit, like that's a great idea. I could develop this further.
Most of it comes from when I do the mindless sketching like this.
Okay.
It says, I'm all tangled. I'm so poetic. But like those types of things really do like inspire. It's like the words inspire a lot of my work. Like I've been journaling consistently since I was like 10 years old.
Oh wow.
I have hundreds, not hundreds.
Was that like a habit that you found yourself, or was that something someone in your family recommended to you, or how did you get into journaling?
I was like just the most obnoxious child. Like I was so obsessed with my own like creating poetry out of my own life that I would like romanticize like my journals. Like, have you seen that show Doug?
Yeah, the cartoon.
Like, yeah, I was like obsessed with Doug. I like wanted to have a diary. I wanted that to be like, I just romanticized it so much. The first journal I ever did, and it was literally me drawing pictures, and then I would dictate what I wanted the words to say to my mom. And the whole journal is just my mom writing down these horrible pictures that I drew of like my day. So it's been some weird.
Mom was the first Midjourney bot. Her descriptions. You're like, Mom, it's twilight.
Literally,
there's a lush forest. It's mushrooms in the foreground, mom.
Mushrooms, mushrooms, mom.
Mom,
More.
there's candles. Yeah, there's
No, I
going.
would do the drawings and she would do the words.
Oh,
So
oh, oh, oh.
I
Yeah, okay.
did, I
I got
drew
you.
like me, like, I don't know, doing some boring shit and she would have to like write
Describe
that.
it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
got you. The inverse is like the
The
describe
inverse.
feature. Yeah, the describe feature. That's
So
awesome. Earlier you mentioned the phones, and that's something that's been on my mind that I'd never really thought of about your work until now. And now that I think about it and I'm looking, I'm seeing a good amount of phones. Like I feel like phones are often taken out of photographs or pictures these day and ages that aren't completely candid because people like, especially in films, like maybe not so much just photographs, but like I don't see phones in new films nearly as much. Like we spend 50% of our day, it seems like, looking at these iPhones or different devices, but we don't see them portrayed in 50% of the media that is outputted. Or I think that's something that just I keep coming back to now. And the way that you said, the way you think about it, because we're always tapped into the phone, and why not, like, you make the phones look so good though. Like it doesn't look like a phone all the time. Like sometimes it's like a flashlight, or it's like the screen is just giving off this ominous light source that's like maybe one of the only light sources in the whole photo, and it maybe tells a bigger story. So that's just something that you said that I can't keep I keep going back to. I don't even think I have a question about it. It's just something that now I'm not going to look at the pieces the same. I'm like, oh, the phone. But one thing I want to talk to you about, maybe if you want to share some behind the scenes, or I know we talked a little bit about the process, but I'm curious as to how it goes from the sketch and the notebook to you in Lightroom, maybe doing a little tweaking.
let me think here. I have a journal. I'm not gonna be able to find it right
No,
now.
we don't have
But,
to go through the journal.
well, I do have one picture that I have. Do you want? Should I share my screen?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Okay. That does have like a very beginning to end. Like I sketched it out, I took the picture and I edited it, but a lot of my pictures also kind of come very spontaneously. So this is just I chose pictures that I thought would be fun to kind of show some color grading, which is predominantly what I do to edit my pictures. So for example, this shot here, that's the first shot that's selected. I'm going to press the little backslash key to show you what it looked like. This is the raw image. Can you see that?
Yes, it just went through. Wow. Wow,
And then,
that looks vastly different.
yeah,
And in the raw image, you have that long exposure that's getting that ghost like.
exactly. So there's two of me. And then the thing about how I've been lighting things, because I am like just a single person in the middle of Illinois, is like, I don't have a gaffer. I don't have like a bunch of resources, but I do have a camera that can shoot in a raw format, and I do have Lightroom. So, and I have to be very, very, very careful to how I underexpose things in order to get like a proper exposure that's going to be long enough to capture the ghost effect, but like not too long to where I'm blowing out the sky or blowing out like the
Mm-hmm.
candle that's in the picture as well. And so that's why you have these surrounding areas, the cornfield, underexposed in the raw image and then brought back up in the edit. And this is like a similar shot, same thing.
That's crazy. Seeing the before and after.
Yeah.
It's crazy how much color you're able to pull out of those underlit tones in the raw. Like
I
the
know.
textures, and especially on that first one too, like it feels like that whole field is completely pitch black, and then the way that you're able to pull out all the different, like, basically corn stalks that are just kind of in the
That are
darkness.
there. Yeah. And
But then the smoke doesn't get too crazy. Like I can see what you're saying with the exposure. Like if it's too long, maybe
you wouldn't see
those
smoke at all, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, and like all of that, the thing about a raw image is that all of that information is there, like the purple is
Mhm.
there, like it's all like embedded into the image. I just have to go and find it. And that requires, if I want to make a purple image, it requires a very special time of day. Otherwise, what's going to happen is there's a fine line with editing where like I force something, then it looks, to me, for my personal style, it feels a little too contrived. There's obviously a lot of editing that's happening here in the colors, but I try to stay true to the actual environment by pulling from colors that are like genuine to the space or the experience of the space while I'm there. And this is a really good example of that too. So you have this image, and those stars are created via the long exposure in a particular lens that I have. For whatever reason, it does this star effect, but this is the raw image.
Oh wow, that's crazy. That's the raw. Like when I look at a lot of your work, my first reaction is like, oh, how does she make that effect in Photoshop or something? And then to see it here, it's like, oh my god, like that was present in the raw.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
look so perfect. Like they're so symmetrical, and like the length of the beams that's crazy.
I like this lens. And this shot was fun because it was actually, I did a workshop for a high school. And so these are all high school students who just helped me out for a day. You could see
that's awesome. And so that's in their auditorium, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
That looks like a Rust Belt auditorium.
Oh, it totally is. And this one's just fun. This is like one where I really love the colors in this image, just for fun. And like the raw is very different. This is like one where I'm like, I'm going to go crazy.
Oh, wow. It's not even like a nighttime. It's just like a normal, it looks like I looked over a koi pond.
It literally is just a koi fish, like totally normal. But I made this one wacky because I just wanted to make fun colors. And then this one is like, here's the before. It's pretty true. I mean, not totally true. It looks way more painterly here, but like it's just all about the thing about my editing style is that it's all just about balancing. You can see my sliders here. Like it's really just about balancing the colors. And like sometimes, you'll put one thing way over here, and by doing so, it'll allow you to access a color over here that you didn't have access to before. So it's like really all about spending a lot of time and juggling, probably, somebody do the math on this, but like thousands of different factors, and like kind of sifting through a million different options that you could have, and slowly finding the ones that like fit. I do have presets. A lot of people ask me about this, so I'm just going in on like creating as much of a comprehensive thing. I don't really use my presets too much because every single picture is different. These were some that my friend gave me here, but these ones are my presets.
Yeah, the presets, I guess, in your sense, like every piece is different. Maybe it gives you like a starting point to jump out of and be like, oh, this looks kind of right. But you do everything so unique to the piece that there's really not a close to one size fits all fit.
It's kind of this fun combination of like magic in the camera and then of course magic in the edit.
Yeah, no, I love how much magic you're able to do in the camera itself. Like when you're looking at these long exposures in particular, so many of them, I think, at least my perception is not somebody who's making the art is like, oh, this was like photoshopped in. Like maybe they took a picture of themselves and made the opacity like 25% or something and put it in, and it's like, no, that was all done in the camera, which is crazy. And I think this behind the scenes really gives people a clear look at like the different ways that you edit something. Like that first shot is so much different than the last shot. So something we started doing is called Rapidfire, and it is 6 questions that you can answer rapid firely, and then we wrap up the pod. So if you don't mind, we'll do a little rapid fire.
Do it.
All right. First question. What is your favorite color?
Green.
What is your favorite animal?
Octopus.
What is your favorite snack food?
Chips. Fries.
What is your favorite book?
Caliban and the Witch.
Who is your favorite artist who is not living?
Tarkovsky. Right.
And
now.
if your house was burning down and you only had time to save one thing, what would it be?
My boyfriend.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh, that's awesome. That was the best rapid fire ever went. Like you had to answer immediately. Had some rapid
Yay.
fires where like there's like a minute to answer. It's like, no, it's like supposed to be what comes to mind first.
I just
So,
put the first things that came to mind. So
I mean, I see the green, like the green blue tones or
I'm
what
actually like direly trying to get out of my teal era. Like it's nauseating me to see so much teal, but I can't get away from it.
it's
It's like
so like encapsulating or it draws me in so much, but I could also see where if you're looking at the entire body of work, you're like, yeah, you're like,
it's time. It's time. So
well,
I think a lot of that has to do with shooting in like certain locations or with certain.
well, I'm curious. Yeah, I know we won't touch too much on it, but I know you are working on some cool stuff and you'll be pushing some boundaries shortly. So we should keep our eyes out. But is there anything you want people to know or think of before we wrap up here?
Stay true to yourself. That's
I
what
love
I
that.
gotta say.
Yeah, be yourself, stay true to yourself. And if you can channel any of Summer's superpower of being present and tuning out of all the noise, you should definitely channel that superpower.